and welcome to the Life Conference 2020. My name is Roxane Nean, and I'm the chair of this year's conference committee. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our very first virtual Life Conference. We have a fantastic lineup, and over the next 2 weeks, you'll have the opportunity to stream a variety of talks covering topical subjects such as climate change, IFoA 17, machine learning, and much more. We have almost 50 life insurance experts presenting 13 live talks and a further 8 pre-recorded sessions for you to watch at your convenience. With me today is Tan Suee Chieh, the IFoA president, who's here to tell us about his experiences as president and where he sees the actual profession going in the future. Tan Suee Chieh graduated from the London School of Economics and started his career at Prudential, where he worked for 20 years in London, Malaysia, and Singapore. In 2001, he took a break from financial services to pursue his passion in psychology before returning to insurance in 2007 as CEO of NTUC Income and then the NTUC Enterprise Group. In 2017, he was elected to the IFoA Council and has been a member of the presidential team since June 2019. Suee Chieh, welcome and thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I just want to make a slight suggestion. My name is actually Suee Chieh. Suee Chieh, but Suee Chieh is my name. Tan Suee Chieh. Tan is my family name. It comes in the front for traditional names, as opposed to the back for English names. Yeah, but it's fine. I feel very welcome and very excited to be interviewed by you for our live community in UK and throughout the world. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Lovely, it's great to have you, yeah. At the start of this year, when we were planning this year's conference, we had not expected it to be a virtual one. 2020 and the COVID pandemic has changed how we work and operate. How has your year of being president changed compared to what you expected it to be? And how have you found working in this environment that we all find ourselves in?
So if you talk about my expectations when I first got elected and until the beginning of this year, I would expect to be in the UK every month. And that was what I would have loved to do, to meet my British friends, to go to our council meetings and to have one-to-ones with the people I know and friendships which I had. But the last trip I made to the UK was in January 20, and I came back on January the 23rd. I remember that day well because it was a couple of days before the Chinese New Year. I have not traveled since, and that is 9 months. Yeah, today is November, 9 or 10 months ago, and I don't expect to be back in the UK before March. Yeah, given what I've read so far, so I could well be the first IFoA president who has never stepped on the soil of UK for the entire duration of his 12 months presidency. Yeah, so obviously it's changed a lot, but in a strange way, I feel that I've accomplished a lot along with IFoA and the actuarial profession in the way we respond to the change, and you have responded to the change by going on a webinar. Because you want to wait for COVID-19 to clear up, you might not know when you will ever get to meet in person again. And there was some silver lining in the cloud, certainly for IFoA and for individuals. So COVID-19 dislocated all my expectations of January 2020, yeah, because that was the time when it started to bite, yeah. And your second point was how have I found working in this environment? I actually, there are 2 words which I would use. I think I had more time to reflect and think because I'm traveling less, I'm reading more. And I think that has been put to good use because I started to reflect some of the things we put together for our strategy on VSMD and the whole idea of thought leadership and what actuaries meant in terms of our position with uncertainty came much more clearer and came alive. And I was able to engage with senior actuaries at the ancillary of IFoA, in the Actuaries of Transformation Group, which actually gave me a lot of food for thought. So that was good in terms of reflection, and we can talk a bit more about that. And the other thing which I thought was about the other word I want to use is about reflexivity. I think that we have lived in a world where we always predict, plan with roadmaps and KPI. But clearly, in your company or in IFoA, any pension scheme or insurance companies, everything changed. Yeah, all the budgets change because we can't even know when we'll go back to normalcy, or the normalcy will be the same, right? So in that kind of environment, one has to be more reflexive. Yeah, in other words, to change what you're about. Yeah. I I was able to do a couple of things on a more personal level. I went into intermittent fasting, which would be hard to maintain if I travel to the UK with the meals and a change in time zone. So I lost some weight, about 4 to 5 kilograms, which is something for me. And then I'm fond of yoga, so I learned a few new poses, rather challenging poses. So I'm pleased with that. And I'm also learning how to swim, something which I couldn't do well for a long time because I grew up in a place where there are no swimming pools. Yeah, so the upside. Yeah, but I suppose you and I are, and maybe many members who are in the audience are fortunate because we have the resources uh, to rely on. But there must be many lives who are disrupted in a way that is very hard to sustain, right? Uh, I was talking to Stephen Mann 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was telling me about staff who live on their own, or they have one child, and they can't go to school, and therefore going to Zoom is difficult. There must be many who have lost their jobs, yeah, those in the retail industry, and the old and vulnerable, and the impact of inequality. So all these are big issues. I think for those who are fortunate, we can say they can be reflexive reflexive but it's maybe for some of us who could do that, or many of us who could do that, but there are many, I think, who find day to day a struggle, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to continue with my job and my career. But yeah, I've heard of many that has been impacted by this. One of the things you had mentioned that you got in time to work on thought leadership and that type of thing. I've been following some of your speeches and LinkedIn blogs, and you quoted Redington a great deal. Why is he of such relevance in the digital age?
I have a history with Prudential. Yeah. So when I joined Prudential in 1981, Redington has retired. He passed away in 1984, 3 years later. I think he retired uh, sometime in 1968, that the year he got his gold medal. And his name is a big name along our actuarial corridors. And his notes are still in our folders, our files of folders, right? And words like the flock and the sheep was a very famous essay he wrote after he's retired, which is about distribution of surplus. And then he used words like the widening funnel of doubt, the widening funnel of doubt, and then taking care of the flock and the sheep, yeah, individuals as well as the fund. So he's always been special, and he's a legend, right? But what was really hit me as a thunderbolt was in February, March, yeah. And I read his, not his presidential address, it was actually his gold medal acceptance speech, yeah. And I've heard that before, but he never quite sink it the way he did. He spoke about our besetting virtues, and he called them accuracy, cautiousness, consistency, and reticence. He says that actuaries don't have any besetting vices, but we could have besetting virtues. And if we do not leave enough room for other virtues like imagination and impulse, he meant the gut feel. We can talk a bit about that later. Uh, we will we do not remember, it could be a weakness. So our our virtues can be a weakness if we do not leave enough room. Okay, when I read it maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was just a list of words about actuaries being accurate and cautious. But I have learned psychology since, and it's remarkable that Redington, whom I think has no formal training in psychology, choosing orthogonal characteristics of certain personality types so beautifully, right? Yeah, because that belongs to a certain personality cluster. And there is a certain degree of dominance in that in the UK actual profession, in the UK, but not necessarily everywhere. And he said that we must be more imaginative. And of course, that was again echoed by people like Peter Clark, Jeremy Gofford, Nick Dumbrach, and Rodney Bowie, yeah, in all their presidential speech, but not so comprehensively as him. So that's why I anchor on that, because I knew that I have to persuade my colleagues in the council and elsewhere that is not my psychologist speaking, but it's more that actually it comes from a very thoughtful and probably I call him the greatest actuary in the last 100 years who actually observed that, and he said make room. But make room for imagination and impulse is about diversity, which is really the theme of our time. Yeah, be more diverse in our approach. But not only that, yeah, because we were working on a different project called VSMD, and from the readings we did in the presidential team and the council, we already know accuracy and consciousness is not the primary mindset we need in a world of digital and the fourth industrial revolution. We need skill sets in data science, but those are skill sets. What they need is curiosity, adaptability, as well as a mindset of experimentation, perseverance, perseverance, and learning from failures so that was called a growth mindset. So when I heard that, I said that, gosh, this is so remarkable. And then he ended up with a phrase: the actuary who is only an actuary is not an actuary, which means that don't just stay being a technical actuary. That's what he meant. In your domain, you got to ask the bigger questions. Yeah, ask the bigger question. And that went into what I call the area of uncertainty, right? So an actuary cannot just be an actuary, a technical actuary must be so what are the values we need? So we came with the values of courage, imagination, which is from him, and then the last one is judgment. And judgment was big because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there's a concept called the appointed actuary, and there's a concept of actuarial judgment. But gradually, we have replaced that with models, with risk theory models, variances, value at risk, which is good, is inform us on stationary populations. But it doesn't capture the risk, and that is a must by COVID-19, by global financial crisis, and many other things which are related. So I thought that was a really good opportunity, because we have to go back to what are actuaries, right? Actuaries, formally, our institute began about 160 years ago, 1848. But the thinking was inspired 300 to 400 years ago. Blaise Pascal, and Pierre Fermat, they were not actuaries by our definition, but they were able mathematicians pondering into the unknown. So they capture the idea of probability and expectations. And then they cross over to Edmund Halley and John Grant, James Dodson, and they were calculating bills of mortality, Q-axis and L-axis. And that was the beginning of actuarial science. And of course, over time, we have expected values, probability distribution theory, and then we build all these systems, pensions, life assurance, but it's always trying to solve the unknown, the uncertainty, and risk theory and probability distribution can capture part of the uncertainty, but a lot of uncertainty cannot be captured. So therefore, we cannot just be an actuary who is not, who is only an actuary is not an actuary. So there's the reason I use Redington to say that actually some of the things we need to have as human beings and as actually can be found in the wisdom of the ages, yeah, even though it's digital. Yeah. So I thought that was a good way to introduce a narrative into our conversation as a basis of the revival of our thought leadership for IFoA as well as the profession. So this is really about our soul, yeah. So and IFoA can give us the voice, yeah, and that speaks to what I mentioned in the presidential address about the decline in our thought leadership and a decline in our influence and the weakening of our voice. Yeah. So I think it's a good time for us to go back, connect back to our soul and our thought leadership and to give it a real compelling voice because that will make us relevant, that will make us impactful and influential. And besides, the world is full of challenges and uncertainties, and is crying out. Is crying out because of the inequality, Black Lives Matter, the planetary crisis, loss of biodiversity, and many of these areas we could exert a stronger influence.
Thanks for that. It was interesting, that quote by Redington that you mentioned. I remember it being one of the very first things I heard when I first started studying actuarial science, and it's stuck with me for a great deal. And it's just been really fascinating to hear how it's still relevant today within our current experiences. You've spoken a lot about where we've come from and how we've gotten to today. You've mentioned how there's still lots of challenges and uncertainty, but there's also been a lot of talk about how the future of work is changing and we'll be doing things differently. So how are you seeing the actual profession in the future? And what are your predictions for the long-term changes for actuaries and perhaps how the IFoA operates?
Oh, that's a big question. Um, I remember Bill Gates says that we tend to overestimate the change we see in 2 years and underestimate the change in 10 years' time. So change can begin very slowly, but actually it's happening fast over 10 years. So you look back, a lot of things could have changed. But next year you go back to your office, and the year after you go back to your office, you'll still be doing the same kind of work, but the context is changing rapidly. Yeah. So I'll put that. Your question was about the profession and changes on IFoA operate. The profession, I see at a very simple level, at a skills level. Yeah, you see, and the whole thesis of VSMD was based on the digital revolution and the fourth industrial revolution. Then eventually thought leadership came in when COVID-19 hit, and sustainability issues were always there, but it came to the foreground because the last 6 months or 8 months, all the sustainability issues came to the foreground because COVID-19 unmasked all the fault lines, right? So as a response, so I want to make it concrete too. IFoA did a remarkable thing, right? We went online. We went online for our March exams. And then we went online in September. And although we have not made a decision, I encouraged the management board we're not going to go back. We're not going to go back because we're on the right side of history. But we would never have done that. We would never have done that. I would say if there was no COVID-19, right? It's either you don't do any exams or you do it online, right? And we learned a lot, and our staff rose to the occasion and respond to it. So it shows that how transformative a crisis can be, right? So that has changed. But also in that between June and September, we set up a committee called Moonshot. And what the name says is that we are going to land on the moon, Moonshot. And we create a whole set of operating principles around our offering to our students and our members. We want us to be a profession where we learn continuously. Of course, qualification is important, but qualification is not a destination. You're part of the actual community because you're continuous learning. And we will partner people to bring new material in. So far, we do partner, but a lot of it is still based on what we do. But a lot of new stuff which we can do is for us to curate, yeah. And also how we could be more flexible in terms of designing our syllabus, in terms of modularization, in terms of modularization and optionality, yeah, because you can give people choices, even at the associate level. So these are big moves, yeah, and we are committed to keep on. We got certificate of data science, and I know that my presidential colleague Luis is busy shepherding a certificate in climate change or climate science, yeah. And then we are not hoping, we are planning to deliver a fellowship in banking. But then we want to build a whole proposition around Moonshot. And in fact, just today, we agree on roughly the membership of that steering committee to oversee it forward. So which is a focus on learning, quick to market, curriculum based on need, not on legacy, delivered with partners and a very flexible approach. So that is very much change in the short term. Change in the long term is cultural. Yeah, I mentioned in my presidential address, and I'm more convinced than ever that we can't deliver our strategy, BSMD, as well as the member value proposition, unless we transform the culture of IFoA, the institution, led by Stephen Mann, supported by the presidential team and council. There's no question in my mind. Yeah. And the second thing is that we have to lighten the governance arrangements. And if you're on practice boards or corporate boards, you will realize that we may have become too focused on process and completeness and accuracy. So therefore, we can't respond quickly. And that is not necessarily wrong. Yeah, but we got to ask ourselves, is that fit for purpose? Yeah, are we serving our members well? Yeah, so you got to ask that kind of question. The cultural change in IFoA is necessary. We got to encourage and let Stephen and his executive team do their work. Yeah, instead of going to many meetings, supporting many meetings, and many chairs, practice boards and corporate board chairs agree that often they are not the best use of their time. Yeah. So an open recognition that there is an issue is a good step forward. So I can see the cultural change as very important. And for that culture, and you say how IFoA should work, in my view, whether you need as many officers as we have now is obviously an obvious question when you go online. And then the question of focus on what members' needs are. Must be focused on what member need rather than what our processes are. I think sometimes we are focused on getting our processes right, focus on what rules we need to follow. But what do our members need? Yeah, and then taking ownership for responsibility. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a secret that we tend to operate as a consensus. And consensus is good, but it's a question of degree. Those governance arrangements and cultural attitudes were built in a very different age. And our dominant quintessential values of accuracy, consistency, and cautiousness come into play. Everything got to be ticked. But that is not very helpful in the digital world. And then we are very cautious. We would not speak up unless we are absolutely clear and all of us agree. In a digital world, you can't operate like that. And in the COVID-19 world, the COVID-19 response group, which I was part of the setting up, had to go outside the IFoA because the internal arrangements would be too difficult for them. But we ensure that we are still doing right by IFoA by making sure that what we publish is consistent with the actuaries code, and that and we behave responsibility. And I think they have done a great job in bringing credit to a profession in one way, whilst Colin DeCuis and Luis in their action task force do it another way, which is actually more thoughtful, more erudite, publications which require more resources, which I think works beautifully. So we need to experiment. How do we integrate, yeah, and become more flexible in terms of our response, because that will shape our future. And then for the individual actuaries, we got to think, we got to be curious about the world. We cannot be, okay, when I say individual, it doesn't mean all of us. It's a question of diversity. Some of us have to be. And we got to have more courage, yeah, and be more imaginative. But judgment is going to be important. And I like to see a resurgence, yeah, or continued enhancement of our thought leadership position. And I've said in a gyro conference, maybe earlier this week on Monday, that I did say in a speech as well, my presidential address, that we could, that our retreat was partly due to the Morris Review with all the technical actuarial standards, and therefore there was an intellectual retreat. But it has been a while since the Morris Review. It must be 10, 15 years. Time for an inflection point, and the whole profession could rise up. And we got to build on that momentum, and I hope that the live conference will add to it. Yeah. So I'm excited about IFoA. I'm excited about the profession.
It's been great to hear about Moonshot and all the things that the IFoA is doing. I'm definitely going to be looking forward to hearing more about it. And I agree, I think the live conference is a great point to hear more thought leadership and where we're going with items. You may have already partially touched on this, but I've seen in one of your recent blogs, you talk about the transformation of the IFoA being the metamorphosis of the butterfly, and this process may take up to 2 to 3 years. Is this what you're explaining to us, or is there more to your thinking behind this?
Actually, it was, and then quite a metaphor. I wanted to give a story about how I saw it, and then Spencer, our director of public affairs and policy, said that it was a useful metaphor, and I was using it metaphorically, because there are different stages of change, yeah, and I was trying to illustrate that I was happy that transformation is on the agenda, but I wish we could start the caterpillar stage a bit earlier, yeah, because I see transformation occurring in stages, yeah. So there is the egg stage where it's on the agenda, and then the kick-off for the caterpillar, where caterpillars start acquiring a lot of materials, options, and capabilities. And the pupa is a time where you really integrate and create the notion of the butterfly, because we are talking about transformational change. We are not talking about incremental change. Yeah. So because we are trying to metamorphosize from what it is today to a butterfly. Yeah. So I felt that for me, the pivot for the beginning of the caterpillar stage was language. Yeah. So I have been advocating transformation, but the word transformation was only being spoken more openly in July, August. Yeah. So and then by July, August, and then even today, our strategy did not talk about transformation. It talks about repositioning. Repositioning and transformation are two different meanings. Yeah. I think there's no need to explain that. But more recently, transformation is in the air, and one of the signal point which I see, partly because of my background, was Stephen and his executive team went for a very important event, what I call a transformational event, where they talk about things, because transformation is not intellectual, it's emotional, understanding, and have authentic speaking, and that occurred in October. I would have, but that is just one point. I would have wanted to have it earlier so we can begin that process. But I also use the word strategic time as opposed to chronological time. We all measure by chronological time, and it was in that spirit I answered that question, as well as the question asked by Ronan McCaughey of Insurance CRM. That was the spirit. But actually, there's something called strategic time, which is how we make progress through tipping points and cascading. Because you know that sometimes we are in flow and you have slept on something for a long time, it has matured. Once you start doing it's very fast, whether it's an essay or piece of work or even packing for a trip. Once you get into a flow, it can be very quickly, can take 1/5 of the time you normally take. So a -3 months can be a +1 month or +2 months if you can come with the aha moments. So I won't be hung up, but I wanted to give an answer that that even a caterpillar can die. Yeah, and we may not. So we got to pay attention. If we love the profession and we appreciate that the price of success is high, and the risk, if you do not do it well, would be very unfortunate indeed. Yeah, would be very unfortunate indeed. So was in that spirit, and I think that the 2 or 3 years came partly because I was a CEO of a cooperative in Singapore. It's called NTUC Income, and it was ran by a very capable man, Tan Suee Chieh, for 30 years as a CEO, and I was the next CEO, and we got a number of public battles about it. And I started a cultural transformation process because the culture was hierarchical. There's high care and concern, hierarchical care and concern. There was work-life balance, and it was a very compliant culture. In some ways, quite similar to IFoA. And some of those values are still very important: care, concern, and teamwork. But we wanted more ownership by individuals. We want independence of thought, not permission seeking. And we also want an orientation towards action. So in that program, and we didn't have a timeline, but then in the middle of it, we wrote out a timeline, and I picked up, say the first phase was longest, about 500 days, was about people and culture. The second phase was about systems and process, which were 400 days. And then you have integration and alignment. Then you have measurement and KPIs, and ultimately celebration and all that. It will not be shorter than 1 year, and it shouldn't go beyond 3 years. So it's anyway between 1 to 2 years, and probably just above 2 years. So that's how I see it. So I therefore say that very fortunately, Louis, who is my successor, and Graham and Stephen, we are very aligned. We could have debates, and we do have debates about how to do it, but we are very aligned and determined that this takes place. And I hope the president after Louis would be of similar orientation. So that was how the butterfly came about, and how the 2 to 3 years came about. And I've done this 2 or 3 times in different places.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how the butterfly turns out in a couple of years. You've been speaking a bit about how the IFoA has been operating. You've spoken about your Louise, who's the next president in line. But what is it that you want your legacy as president to be?
I think it can't be just my legacy, because it won't be completed in 1 year. But I would like to see that we make substantial progress on VSMD, cultural transformation and thought leadership. Yeah, VSMD, cultural transformation, thought leadership, and underneath culture, there's a bit on governance. Yeah, because I remembered the first president I had a connection with was Colin Wilson, and his was thought leadership. Yeah. And after that was Marjorie. Marjorie theme was about being future fit, which is very much driven by digital. And then she had something on sustainability, I remember. And then the one from Jules was about stepping out of the shadows, but actually internally, the way I remember Jules was that he talked about the voice of the profession, voice of actuaries. He talked in a council that we have lost our voice. I remember that vividly. John, I would say that one thing which come out is data science, and data science is a very concrete delivery, which he was very after. He was very practical, and he was very interested in consumer finance, and that is still on the agenda. And Louise, I know that she's our doyen on climate change and sustainability. But her presidency has not come, so I cannot double guess her. I cannot guess. But mine has always been about transformation or a progression. But my ideas, which is came to my ear, includes what you say about voice, what what Colin said about thought leadership, what Marjorie said about future fit, what John talked about data science and consumer finance. Consumer finance is about public interest, right? Taking care of customers. And if it's climate change for Louis, then it's also part of the social impact considerations for actually. So mine is really not specific to me, but maybe having a frame. Everything is connected. We want to be thought leaders in a future fit way. We want to reclaim our voice. We want to step out of our shadows. We want to be protecting our customers, consumer finance, but at the same time appreciating that we need to work with commercial companies as employees. So there is a need for ambidextrous skill, but we just don't want just to talk. We have to deliver on data science and machine learning, because otherwise these are all conceptual ideas. Your people will then know, okay, data science, machine learning, and AI is going to be an increasing proportion of our basic syllabus. And if we're going to have optionality where people then can become very capable actuaries at an associate level, and even very able fellows who are like surgeons, right? If you think of associates like doctors, the fellows are like surgeons, yeah. So because they have a specialization, so that's how we are thinking about it. So I'm very flattered to be part of the process, right? It was not even in my plan or my dreams to be in the council, right? Let alone to be president, to be part of the process, to contribute to a lot of work which is done in yesteryears and more work to be done in the future.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute honor to listen and speak to you today. So thank you for coming along to share your thoughts with us. I would also just like to thank everyone else who has made this live conference possible. Thank you to my committee, as well as the IFoA exec, Waleed Soliman, Amanda Davey, and Nikki Lavie-Lewis. Thank you also to our generous sponsors, Milliman, Harman Robertson, and Oliver James Associates. And finally, a big thank you to our speakers for taking their time in researching, preparing, and presenting their talks. I wish we all could be meeting in person, but I do hope you enjoy this year's virtual conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Roxane for inviting me, and thank you to all the speakers and sponsors for doing this. And I hope the attendees will learn a great deal and enjoy interacting. I still hope one day I can attend a live conference. That will be, the next conference will be in 2021 October. I hope to come.
Yes, fingers crossed that next year it will be much better. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.